It is late autumn 1908, Cambridge, Massachusetts. The air inside the Harvard Psychological Laboratory is stale, smelling faintly of sawdust and ozone. Two men, Robert Yerkes and John Dodson, are leaning over a wooden box. It isn't a large apparatus, just a simple maze constructed of unpolished pine, divided into two chambers. Inside the box, a small creature is moving. It is a Japanese dancing mouse, a specific breed known for its frantic spinning energy. But right now the mouse isn't dancing. It is hesitating. The mouse stands at a threshold. To its left, a passageway painted a stark, glossy black. To its right, a passageway painted bright white. The mouse sniffs the air, its whiskers twitching in the dim gaslight of the lab. It steps tentatively toward the black passage, and then, snap. A jolt of electricity zips through the metal grid on the floor. It is not enough to injure the creature, but it is enough to startle it. The mouse recoils, squeaks, and scrambles back to the center. It pauses, shakes its head, and then darts into the white passage. Silence. Safety. No shock.
Yerkes and Dodson mark a tick on their clipboard. They are not simply testing memory, they are testing the relationship between stress and performance. Over the next few weeks, they repeat this hundreds of times, but they introduce a variable. They turn a dial. For some mice, the shock is a tiny, barely perceptible tingle. For others, it is a moderate sting. And for a third group, the voltage is cranked up to a punishing jolt. What they discover in that drafty laboratory will eventually become known as the Yerkes-Dodson law, and it contradicts everything we tell ourselves about safety. The mice that received the tiny, comfortable tingle, they learned slowly. They didn't really care if they made a mistake because the consequence was negligible. They were comfortable, and therefore they were incompetent. The mice that received the massive, painful shock, they panicked. They scurried in circles, too terrified to think, too overwhelmed to learn. They were in the panic zone, and they failed. But the mice in the middle, the ones who felt a sharp, undeniable sting, they were the geniuses of the group. The stress focused their minds. The discomfort sharpened their senses. They learned the maze faster than any other group. They didn't want to be there, but the friction of that environment forced them to adapt.
We like to tell ourselves that the comfort zone is a place of rest, a sanctuary where we recharge. But the brutal truth written in the behavior of dancing mice over a century ago is that the comfort zone is not a sanctuary. It is a slow-motion trap. It is a state of behavioral anesthesia where learning stops, where adaptation dies, and where performance flatlines. Today, we are going to look at the mechanics of this trap. We are going to walk through the glass walls of a failed ecosystem in the Arizona desert, and we are going to dissect the neural loops in your own brain that fight to keep you stagnant. We are going to learn why safety is dangerous. To understand why we crave comfort, we have to define what it actually is. In 2009, a management theorist named Alistair White wrote a white paper that finally gave us a clinical definition of this fuzzy concept. He didn't define the comfort zone as happiness or relaxation. He defined it as an anxiety-neutral condition. Think about that phrase, anxiety-neutral. It means you aren't worried, but you also aren't excited. You are using a limited set of behaviors to deliver a steady level of performance without a sense of risk. It is the psychological equivalent of idling your car in the driveway. The engine is running, the radio is playing, the climate control is perfect, but you aren't going anywhere. And if you sit there long enough, you run out of gas. The problem is that your brain loves the idle state. Biologically, you are wired to seek the path of least resistance. It is an evolutionary conservation strategy. To see this in action, we have to look at the architecture of your skull. Deep inside your brain, near the center, sits a cluster of nuclei called the basal ganglia. This is the ancient part of your brain, the autopilot. It stores your habits, your routines, the things you can do without thinking. When you brush your teeth, when you drive to work on a route you've taken 1,000 times, when you nod along in a meeting without really listening, that is the basal ganglia running the show. It is incredibly efficient. It burns very little energy. Now, contrast that with the prefrontal cortex. This is the thin layer of tissue right behind your forehead. It is the CEO of your brain. It handles complex decision-making, learning, and voluntary discomfort. It is the part of you that says, I should speak up in this meeting, or I should try a new approach. But here's the catch. The prefrontal cortex is a metabolic furnace. It is expensive to run. It tires easily. When you stay in your comfort zone, you are letting the basal ganglia drive. You are saving energy. It feels good because it's easy. But the moment you step out, the moment you try to learn a difficult skill or have a hard conversation, the prefrontal cortex has to kick in. And what does that feel like? It feels like friction. It feels like agitation. It feels like stress. And this is where the brutal truth comes in. Most of us interpret that friction as a signal to stop. We think, oh, this feels bad. Something must be wrong. I should go back to safety. But biologically, that friction is the signal that learning has started. That agitation is the sound of your prefrontal cortex waking up. If you retreat every time you feel that sting, you are essentially lobotomizing your own potential. You are keeping the CEO locked out of the boardroom and letting the autopilot fly the plane. But the cost of the comfort zone isn't just about missed potential or stagnation. It is about structural integrity. When you remove stress from a system, you don't just get a stable system, you get a fragile one. You get a system that looks healthy on the outside, but is rotting on the inside.
There is no better example of this than the story of Biosphere 2. Let's jump forward from the Harvard lab to September 26, 1991. We are in the Sonoran Desert in Oracle, Arizona. The sun is beating down on a structure that looks like it landed from another planet. It is a massive 3-acre complex made of steel and glass, a hermetically sealed geodesic dome sparkling in the heat. This is Biosphere 2. The goal is audacious, to create a completely self-sustaining model of Earth. Inside this glass bubble, scientists have recreated the world. There is a miniature ocean with a coral reef. There is a mangrove wetland. There is a savanna grassland. And there is a lush, dense rainforest. 8 people, 4 men and 4 women, are sealed inside. The airlock hisses shut, isolating them from the rest of the world for 2 years. They are growing their own food, recycling their own water, and breathing oxygen generated by the plants around them. It is a utopia of engineering, a perfect, controlled environment. For the first few months, the plants thrive. The rainforest explodes with greenery. The banana trees shoot up toward the glass ceiling. The vines spread rapidly. It looks like a paradise. The conditions are ideal: perfect temperature, perfect water, nutrient-rich soil. It is the ultimate comfort zone for flora. But then the biospherians notice something strange. The trees are growing fast, faster than they would in the wild. But they are also weird. They're spindly. They look flimsy. And then one by one, before they can even reach maturity, the trees start to fall over. They simply collapse under their own weight. The scientists are baffled. They check the soil nutrients. They check the light levels. Everything is perfect. Why is the forest collapsing? The answer, it turns out, was the air, or rather, the movement of the air. In their quest to create a perfect environment, the designers had forgotten one crucial element: wind. In the wild, a tree is constantly battled by the wind. It blows from the north, then the south. It gusts and swirls. This invisible violence pushes the tree around, bending its trunk, pulling at its roots. To the tree, this feels like stress. It is a constant attack. But the tree responds to this stress in a very specific way. It produces a substance called stress wood, or technically, reaction wood. Reaction wood is different from normal wood. It has a different cellular structure. It contains more cellulose and lignin. It is denser, harder, and stronger. When the wind pushes a tree, the tree reinforces its structure in the exact places where the stress is applied. It builds a deeper, more complex root system to anchor itself. The stress of the wind is literally the architect of the tree's strength. Inside Biosphere 2, the air was still. There was no struggle. There was no wind to push against the trunks. The trees grew rapidly because they didn't have to waste energy building reaction wood. They put all their energy into height and leaves. They looked magnificent, but they had no spine. They had no structural integrity. And the moment they got big enough, gravity, the one stressor they couldn't escape, pulled them down. This is the brutal truth about your comfort zone. When you remove the wind, when you remove the deadlines, the difficult projects, the awkward social interactions, the physical exertion, you don't just stay the same. You become a biosphere tree. You might look fine on the outside. You might even feel like you're growing or expanding your leisure time. But you are not building reaction wood. Your root system is shallow. You are becoming
We see this fragility in the modern concept of safetyism, a term social psychologist Jonathan Haidt discusses. We have created a cultural biosphere too. We have engineered our lives to eliminate friction. We have temperature-controlled rooms, food delivered to our doors, algorithms that only show us opinions we agree with. We have created an anxiety-neutral existence, and as a result, our tolerance for distress has plummeted. Small challenges, a traffic jam, a critical email, a conflicting political view, now feel like catastrophic threats. We are collapsing under our own weight because we haven't felt the wind in years.
So, how do we break the glass? How do we reintroduce the wind without shocking ourselves into the panic zone, like those terrified mice in the Harvard lab? The answer lies in the concept of hormesis. Hormesis is a biological phenomenon where a beneficial effect results from exposure to low doses of an agent that is otherwise toxic or lethal when given at higher doses. Think of exercise. If you run a marathon without training, you will destroy your body. That is a toxic dose of stress. But if you run 3 miles, you create micro tears in your muscles. You create inflammation. You're technically damaging your body. But your body responds to that microdamage by overcompensating. It repairs the muscle fibers to be thicker and stronger than they were before. Growth doesn't happen during the comfort. Growth happens in the recovery from the discomfort. But you have to have the discomfort first. You need to inject voluntary stressors into your life. This is not about being a masochist. It is about being an architect of your own reaction wood. It's about understanding that the basal ganglia wants you to be a soft, falling tree, and you have to override it. Let's look at how this plays out in a real, tangible human moment. Picture a standard corporate boardroom. Fluorescent lights, a long mahogany table. A presentation is ending. The manager asks, "Does anyone have any questions?" You are sitting there. You have a question. Actually, you have a disagreement. You think the strategy is flawed. You feel a physical sensation in your chest, a tightening. That is your amygdala, the fear center, firing. It is sending a signal to your basal ganglia. Keep your mouth shut. Stay safe. Don't risk social rejection. This is the threshold. This is the mouse standing between the white box and the black box. If you stay silent, you remain anxiety neutral. You survive the meeting, but you build no reaction wood. You reinforce the habit of silence. Your root system gets a little shallower. But if you speak up, if you raise your hand, you feel a spike of heat. Your voice might shake. You are now in the Yerkes-Dodson optimal anxiety zone. You are stressing the system. Regardless of how the manager reacts, the victory is in the action itself. You have forced your prefrontal cortex to override the autopilot. You have engaged the wind. And the next time you need to speak up, it will be easier, not because the fear is gone, but because you're stronger. The brutal truth is that you cannot think your way out of the comfort zone. You cannot read enough books or listen to enough podcasts to build reaction wood. You have to experience the wind. You have to stand in the cold. You have to have the hard conversation. You have to fail at the new skill.
There is a beautiful, terrifying irony in the human condition. We work our entire lives to build a world of comfort, to earn enough money to buy safety, to insulate ourselves from hardship. And yet, the moment we achieve that perfect safety, we begin to die. We begin to rot. The very thing we strive for is the thing that undoes us. So look at your life right now. Look at the glass walls you have built around yourself. Where is the air too still? Where are things too easy? That is not a sign of success. That is a warning. The trees are getting heavy and there is no wind to hold them up. Robert Yerkes and John Dodson showed us the map in 1908. The biosphere showed us the consequence in 1991. The biology of your own brain shows you the mechanism every single day. The choice is yours. You can stay in the white box, safe and small and soft, or you can step into the friction, feel the shock, and start to grow. If you know someone who has been playing it too safe lately, send this episode to them. It might be the wind they need